All right, welcome to another edition of SpectrumCast, our modern data protection podcast that talks about things all around all things modern data protection. As usual, here with my subject matter experts, Sean Sperry and Tricia Jang. And this week we wanted to take a little bit of a departure instead of talking about things around architecture, but maybe take a breath and talk about how we think COVID and the times we're living in today have an effect on modern data protection. So why don't we start right off? Tricia, why don't you give us a little bit of thought on kind of how you're seeing COVID in this new world, or some of the things or some of the characteristics that are having an impact on data protection in general, given this time?
Yeah, one of the big things I'm seeing has to do with the people who are involved in the disaster recovery and in the backup. And with this, a lot of us being remote, with conferences being canceled, and any type of like sales meetings, all of that being canceled, I'm really seeing the shift for how you're getting education, how you are coming together in these online conferences, how you're going about learning about new technologies, and even how are you hiring people? Because if you have an opening, how do you get that person in there, and how do you get them trained when everybody's remote?
You bring up a good topic around education. That's even one step further than I was thinking. I was thinking just selling in general, and I have my own kind of personal thoughts, right? From a sales motion perspective, obviously the sellers want to be able to go out and have conversations with clients. So that brings to question just how do clients kind of go through that learn, try, buy? A lot of the things that we're trying to do within IBM is make things a lot easier to consume through the web, so that I can read about it, learn about it. I can download a demonstration and see it, right? Hopefully we've got some video assets that are customer testimonials, so talking about the value proposition, and then maybe I want to buy it. But then the next step is, okay, I bought this thing. I clearly don't have all of the bells and whistles ironed out. I need to go to some education to learn about this stuff. And a lot of folks go to our different conferences and that sort of thing to kind of get that level of help. One thing that I say, and Sean, I'd be interested in your opinion. My opinion is that from a data protection standpoint, because backup is, I'll use the term somewhat sticky, from the standpoint of, I think we all know if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it's running, just leave it alone, right? That I'm not, given these times, I'm not a client out looking for a new solution. To your point, Tricia, from before, I want to make sure I'm protecting my information, I'm providing the right disaster recovery for my information. And again, if it's working, I have bigger fish to fry given this kind of change in how things are happening. And the question, so I think, my opinion would be that from a selling standpoint, right, clients are going to continue to go with what they know that is actually working for them. But I could be very wrong. So Sean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I kind of see both sides of the picture there. You know, I mean, it's interesting. As big as IBM is, right, we've always been a person-to-person selling organization, right? The way we sell things, the way we introduce concepts and things to people is by sending someone. I think with a lot of our products, and Spectrum Protect Plus is an example, we've tried to make that self-service, that go out there and discover it type of solution much more accessible to businesses in general. And I think we've done a pretty good job on some of that. You know, I do agree with you that in these COVID times, right, people don't like to change. You know, I got enough to deal with on my plate. If it's not broken, my inclination at least is going to be to leave it alone and not go out there and make a.
Sean, I'm going to challenge you on that one, because I think if a administrator remotely gets frustrated with having a lot of different DR and backup solutions, they may well say to heck with all those small solutions and go to a centralized solution like the Spectrum Protect family, where we can protect all kinds of different solutions, all kinds of different data in one solution.
Yeah. And I guess my comment to that, which is very typical of these type of situations, is that's kind of an example where it really was broken, or at least broken to some extent, right? And the situation with the COVID kind of brought that to light, right? Because people were maybe working together in place or working very closely to come up with solutions, and now all of a sudden they can't do that, right? So you kind of see where the cracks are and maybe want to come up with a solution for it.
But likewise, I mean, and Steve, you can address this. Last week we talked about tape, and tape is great if you've got an administrator, but if everybody's working from home, then suddenly cloud or remote, node replication starts looking good for DR. What do you think about that?
Well, that brings up another question, right? And one of my thoughts was, network bandwidth, right? With everybody working from home, and we're experiencing, even in some of these podcasts, a little bit of networking hiccups. So that means, do I have the right application to write to the cloud? Does it do the right on-prem storage efficiency or data efficiency before I do my replication to the cloud? And does that work? And if not, do I switch? Or if that's a place I want to go, do I need to get a different solution to kind of solve that challenge? I mean, it brings all of that to light. And we talked about cloud just a couple of weeks ago, right?
The re-architecture to the cloud, right? Your architectures, and I won't even call it a technical architecture. I'll call it a business process with data protection, is as big a part of the investment as any technology or any particular product, right? It's how do you run this data protection operation? What are the people and what are the processes that you've been put in place? And chances are that has taken you years to put in place, right? So Steve, to your point, you're exactly right. You don't just snap your fingers and say, well, I changed my mind due to COVID. We're not going to go to tape anymore. We're going to go to the cloud. It don't work like that, right? It's just too complex.
But back to your comment about the network being a potential issue just because of the mass amount of people using it, how is that changing the type of data that needs to be protected? Is that a change happening in this environment?
From a volume standpoint, you mean, or data types?
Volume or application? I mean, but are there new types of applications out there that are generating data that wasn't necessarily there before COVID?
Well, I think that brings up an interesting point, right? So when COVID hit, and we've seen a lot of different research, and I'll bring up some of this that we can talk about, but we've heard about executives making decisions to go to more cloud-based applications. So something like a Salesforce that is a cloud-based Salesforce application, so I'm not hosting it, or an Office 365 Exchange, so it's being hosted someplace else. And that begs the question, right? How or should I protect those, right? Microsoft will tell you, yeah, you still want to back up and protect your Office 365 Exchange environment, right? I believe I was reading something earlier saying that Salesforce is no longer doing quote unquote backups of those environments. So you want to be able to do that, which begs the question, right? I in IT, if I've been mandated, let's go and try one of these new cloud-based solutions. Okay, that's good. That gets rid of a lot of the headaches I might have in the data center. What new headaches does it generate for me, and how do I architect for those types of solutions? So I do think there are new applications creating new data types. It's or maybe they're the same data types, they're just being generated in a new way. And what new things do I need to think about to solve those challenges?
And on that same vein, what type of new reporting or monitoring, or for instance, if you're in support structure, generation and collection of traces is coming to light as well. And I'm sure there's got to be new things happening there to help all these people working remotely, or like with Spectrum Protect, maybe more people are getting into the operations center, are using things like our data collector for our support group. So I wonder if a lot of those tools are picking up.
Yeah, I would think they would have to, right? I mean, as a user, you're going to need more insight into Sean's point because you're not in the data center, right? How are you going to get that insight? The tools have to be there. We're working on some things obviously not available today, but if you're familiar with, if clients are familiar with storage insights, right, we're going to be adding that to our software that helps with things like supportability, reporting, monitoring, and that sort of thing. Again, not there yet, but we definitely see the need, especially in these particular times.
I guess the other thing I would add to this, to maybe take this in a completely different way, to kind of go to what you said, Steve, is predicting how COVID is going to affect my operations, and from any sort of logical perspective, has been very difficult. I mean, because we have never seen anything like this, right? I mean, it hasn't come to pass in our lifetimes. So many of the predictions that people made about how this is going to change things and what's going to change, I think have proved to be just wrong, right?
So maybe we I was going to say, put a stamp in the ground today. That's a good jumping off point, and say, based on the things that we've heard and we've learned, right, what would be our advice to clients of questions they should ask themselves about their data protection environment, and are they prepared? What would be some topics they should be thinking about?
I would say the first one is disaster recovery. And I know I seem to come back to this on each of these topics, but you've got to have that disaster recovery plan in, especially with all the uncertainty of people being out sick or worse. You've got to be able to go in there and do some type of step-by-step planned out procedures if there is a problem and you do need to restore data.
Yeah. I mean, to add on to that, what you need has not changed, right? It's exactly the same as before COVID. It's just the way that you have to affect this and the way you have to do it has changed, right? And I think you have to look at your individual environment to come to the conclusion of, what's not working properly given our current COVID restrictions, and how can we change that reasonably without toppling the whole cart at once, so to speak.
And I know, Sean, you've been really involved with our virtual Tech U coming up. And one thing I see as really promising with this virtual Tech U is that more people will be able to join because they don't have to travel. They don't have to pay for hotels and everything. So hopefully we'll see more people coming in. And if people are willing to get on and network on the chat sessions and all, I think that's actually a really great way to reach these people who normally aren't at our conferences.
When we were just talking about different topics to be able to ask clients about, one of the things that I see that we see all throughout the news are all the different things coming through about the rise in ransomware. So, and I personally think ransomware is a disaster. So to your point, Richard, disaster recovery. But, we don't talk in the systems group about cybersecurity. That's the security team and keeping the bad actors out. What we talk about is cyber resilience and being able to rebuild your business in the event of an attack, a lot like a disaster, right? So now we know, based on statistical information coming from a lot of different sources, that there is a big rise in the number of cyber attacks, which means there's a rise in the different ways that you can have a disaster within your environment. And the questions are you prepared for those things? So, and while you might be prepared for maybe a natural disaster, maybe you do some offsite replication or use tape like we talked about, are you prepared to be able to do very fast operational recovery, maybe from a snapshot, in case you identify the malware very quickly? Or we know malware can lie dormant for a couple hundred days. Are you going to tape or some offsite immutable storage to protect that information, right? So there are some things to think about. I think at a very high level, you have your disasters. One of those disasters can be cyber attacks, right? That brings into question what software componentry are you using, snapshotting capabilities versus long-term backup capabilities. It brings in your target devices, immutable storage versus tape, could be cloud. I mean, there's a whole lot of topics that to your point, Sean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it in my day to day, right? Let's let it keep going. But is it really broke? And do you even know if it's broke, right? In situations, especially around cyber attacks.
And one thing I'd add to the cyber attacks is cyber attacks can also occur from internal threats. It's not just a bad party operative out there. So if you have people moving in and out of your company, you've also got to make sure you're going out there, cleaning up the access, the administrators, and who's can get into these systems, especially when everybody's being given remote access. And so I would add that to the list of things to check.
That's a whole nother subject, right? Cybersecurity. And you know, Steve, it's kind of interesting you said, you know, that maybe from a selling perspective, it's the cybersecurity's team to deal with the security aspects of security. But I would say it's all of our responsibilities, right? Because all of these products and systems, if mismanaged, can be so vulnerable to all of these attacks that we all have to take responsibility. And you know, we have whole lectures that we've conducted on how to harden just various pieces and parts of this whole infrastructure to make it resilient and protected from cyber attacks.
Yeah, and maybe that makes the case for, if you are backing up to tape, to having your tape administrator be a critical worker who has access to the building and can make sure those tapes are still being taken, your backups are still being taken off site.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're right, Sean. Data is the lifeblood. It's the asset that everybody keeps talking about, right? It is everybody's responsibility, and it's not just about security. And we have done a lot. And as Tricia said, we'll be doing a lot during the Tech U that's coming up to talk about, you know, hardening your infrastructure. Well, there's hardening the infrastructure, but also ensuring that that infrastructure can be recovered in the event that there's that some event happens and that you're prepared. So I want to thank you guys. It's been a really good topic to talk about and to just think about, and maybe hopefully we can open the eyes of some of the folks listening and generate some new ideas and some new thoughts about how they should be thinking about operating their data protection environment in the event of COVID. Sean, any parting words?
Nope, not really.
Nope.
Nope. You got me out of this.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Yeah. That's we're gonna get through this.
We are going to get through this. Tricia, any parting words?
My parting words are, start thinking a little bit bigger about the environment that we're in, because this isn't going away in the next year or so. We're going to continue to deal with it. And I think this is a chance to take some of the lessons learned and make it so that we have products, that you have procedures in place that are giving you information and access in different ways, so that the administrators aren't constantly having to go on site, so that you are consolidating your backup plans. So use this as a bigger picture type of opportunity.
As we've seen from IDC, right, there's a big move around digital transformation. I think it was the CEO of Microsoft that said, we have seen more change or more technology change or growth in the last 2 months as we've seen in the last 2 years. And I think a lot of clients are looking at how to even take that modernization forward for all things as a part of their data center. So if you do, you know, we hope that you look at IBM's solution, as Tricia had mentioned, to be able to consolidate a lot of the things that you're trying to accomplish and be able to solve a lot of the challenges that you're trying to do. We welcome you to come to our Tech University, our virtual Tech University. There's going to be a lot of good topics there, as Tricia pointed out. And as always, we hope you enjoyed this session. And again, if you have any questions or if you have any thoughts or any topics that you'd like us to talk about or cover, we welcome them. Please hit us up on Slack or email or any place that you might find us in any of the comment sections of the blogs or the vodcasts on Seismic or that sort of thing. So thank you very much.